The following program is made possible through the collaborative efforts of the PEG channels of Montgomery County, Maryland. Your public education and government channel organizations are providing local news, information, arts, and sports content specifically for and about the people of Montgomery County, Maryland. The PEG channels thank you for your continued support.
Good evening and welcome to Montgomery Community Media's election coverage. I'm Cindy Pena.
And I'm Gary Nirenberg. We're here tonight to bring you hyper-local coverage with unique perspectives you'll get nowhere else on this important election for Montgomery County.
Now, for the next few hours, we're going to keep you up to date on the local election results, and we'll talk with political insiders, bloggers, and journalists about what today's vote will mean for Montgomery County. We also want you to follow us on Twitter at MyMCMedia and use the hashtag VoteMCM. That's hashtag VoteMCM. So follow us on Twitter.
And we will also have live reporting from several local campaign headquarters tonight.
We begin our coverage with insights from county voters. MCM sampled a few polling places today and asked the voters about the issues that are most important to them. Here's a look at what some of the voters shared with us.
I do think people are very energized in this election. We live right next to the nation's capital here, and we are subject to all the press, all the news about everything that comes out of the White House on a regular basis. So people here have pretty strong feelings about the president. The question is how that will translate into the state and local elections.
We've got a dysfunctional federal government because the last defense for citizens right now is actually state and local governments. So what we do locally is ever more important than ever. I mean, we're the ones that are going to fight the climate battle. We're the ones that are going to fight the social justice battle. All the things that, that will make America better are going to start at the bottom. And maybe that's the best way. We rebuild this party and rebuild the movement from the bottom. And in 2 years, we make sure the White House winds up in the right hands.
And we caught up with voters at the polls today throughout our county, our program, and we're going to be listening to what they have to say later on.
But right now we're going to be listening to what they have to say when it comes to our first two guests. They're two highly regarded local digital media producers. So we'd like you to welcome the journalist and publisher behind the Germantown Pulse news site, Kevin O'Rourke, and the widely read local blogger, Dan Reed, who is the blogger behind the East County blog Up the Pike. One of them is good looking, one of them is smart. You can determine who's who later in the evening. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us here tonight at MCM. As we start, before we know what any of the rules are, give us your predictions on what the biggest surprises are going to be tonight and what you expect to happen.
I think the biggest surprise is going to be the margin of victory for the candidate. It's not going to be as close as we think it's going to be. I think that the person who wins is going to be pretty decisively in a victory. But I don't want to give away what I think is going to be.
Now, do you think that's for all races?
I think, well, for the county executive race, I think it's going to be. I think the split vote is not going to go the way many folks have predicted it will.
Why?
That I don't know.
Dan, as we look ahead, what are you expecting?
I think we're going to see that the blue wave, while it might appear strong in Montgomery County, may not be as big as we think, and we are likely to see the governor get reelected this evening.
Okay, well, that'll be interesting because we've got a blue wave coming, as the people have predicted, but we'll see what the Republicans are able to come up with or how many Democrats, in fact, go for Larry Hogan for governor.
While we're talking about Democrats, you have a perspective about Democrats in Montgomery County and what this election may mean for the Democratic presence in the county in the future.
Well, I just think the Democratic Party in this county is so large, and it's sort of like a cycle, right? because it's so large and so influential and has such a registration advantage, people join the party because they know that's how they can participate in the primary or run for office and win. And so you get everybody from Reagan to Marx in the Democratic Party. And this year in the primaries, you saw the diversity and some of the schisms in the party as a result. You had a very crowded primary for county council seats. 33 people ran at large, for 4 seats. We had a very crowded county executive primary where 6 people ran, and the 2 top vote getters were 77 votes apart. And now we're seeing in the general election 2 Democrats basically running against each other. And I think that's really illustrative of some of the big disagreements in the local party. They may track some of the same things we're seeing at the national level, and some of them are very different disagreements. But I think it's something that the party's really going to have to reckon with, regardless of who wins this evening.
Well, let me talk about 2000, because when you said that, I'm reminded of the presidential election back then in Florida. Is Nancy Floreen in Montgomery County this year what Ralph Nader was to the Democratic Party in Florida in 2000?
Well, I don't think so. The really good political blog, 7th State, did an analysis earlier this year where they looked at, the past performance of Republican county executive candidates, and it hasn't been great. And what they predicted, and what I think we'll see this evening, is instead of splitting the Democratic vote such that the Republican could win, I think Mark Elrich and Nancy Floreen will take some Democratic votes and some independent votes, and it'll be one of the two. But Robin Ficker continues to not stand a chance, as he has for the past almost 40 years.
You cover different parts of the county. Is your perspective in Germantown different than someone who writes for the eastern part of the county?
I think to a certain extent, yeah. I think we're a little more maroon up in Germantown, a little bit more. There's some pockets of Republicans up there. The GOP has a strong base up in the up county, more so than certainly in the down county in Silver Spring where Dan is.
Hold your thoughts, gentlemen. Cindy, you want to go somewhere?
Yes, we want to go to Rockville. Republican County Executive candidate Robin Ficker is a staple of Montgomery County politics. In fact, this is the 20th time that he's run for office. He is at his election headquarters along with the other Republican candidates tonight at a restaurant in Rockville. And Aquanette Crosby is live there now. Aquanette?
We're here with Robin Ficker, the Republican candidate for county executive, here at La Hinch Tavern in Potomac at his watch party. Very nice turnout, about 75 people here.
Well, we have a lot of people who are fiscally responsible in the Republican Party, unlike our counterparts.
Okay, well, anyway, you were up bright and early this morning at the Metro station. I think you said 5:30 a.m. campaigning that last final push. Any predictions for yourself?
Well, I think we're going to do very well if we don't win. I expect that the voters realize we have to have fiscal responsibility. They know I'll give it to them. They don't think the other two will, but if they win, I'm going to give them fiscal responsibility in 2020 with a tax cap on property taxes that we don't have now.
Okay, great. Still campaigning. So, if you win, you would be the second Republican to hold the seat of county exec, James Gleason being the first back in 1970. What does that say about Montgomery County voters, and is it an uphill battle for Republicans?
It's saying that they need to be a little more broad-minded and not just vote the party line, because we have a number of tax increase specialists in the county government, which are concentrated in the southeast corner, the Tacoma Park trapezoid. So we need some fiscal responsibility, some up-county people in the county government.
Okay, and so you think you are the guy to do that?
Well, I hope so. If the voters don't agree this time, then we'll put the tax cap on in 2020.
Speaking of this time, you've ran 20 times, which shows that you're very passionate. And you've had 2 major successes. Talk about those very briefly, one being term limits.
Well, we had term limits on the ballot where we caught 5 tax increase specialists so they couldn't run back for their office again. And also I got the property tax limit, which requires a unanimous vote of the council to increase property taxes more than the rate of inflation. The problem is now that the Democrats think they have a locked in 9 votes to exceed the property tax cap anytime they want. The revenue is not increasing in Montgomery County. We're not going to get Amazon. So So we're going to be hit with Kerwin, which is a big money grab by other parts of the state of our education money. We're going to have to limit our expenditures. And I don't think that Mr. Elric, for instance, who said that civilizations are never remembered for their tax rates, is going to be one who has any ability whatsoever to limit tax increases.
All right, that's the passion that I was just talking about. Okay, we're going to continue at this watch party. For right now, we're going to send it back to you in the studio.
All right, thank you very much, Aquanette.
One of the candidates that Mr. Ficker wants to defeat is Nancy Florine, and Doug Tallman is with her now at her election headquarters in Rockville. Doug.
I got 3 dots. I got stand by, hang with me, stand by. No, I'm not going to lead in at all. Okay, so we're with Nancy Florine. How do you feel tonight?
Well, it's been a wonderful experience, and it's really interesting right now. We'll see how it goes tonight.
Okay, so talk about the campaign. What were the bright spots?
Well, we figured out that we had about 700 volunteers. In 120 days, we made a campaign. It's really incredible. We raised over nearly $1 million. We gathered over 20,000 signatures. We'll see where the votes are tonight. But we have had such great conversations with the community. It really has unleashed a lot of excitement and feeling about our future. And I feel great about it. It really has been terrific.
So, and talk about what were the low points of the campaign?
Low points? Oh, there really haven't been any. I think, really, it's politics. There are always low points in politics. People aren't always at their best in their behavior and so forth, but it doesn't bother me. I've been in this game for a while, and I'm used to how things can go.
So there probably at the end of tonight, there will only be one woman on the county council.
Well, that is for sure.
And
that is a fact.
So, and as the only woman in the county executive race, how important will there be to drum up female support in future elections?
Well, I'm not sure what the answer to that is. I'm not sure women are so keen on electing women. I think it's more easily said than done. I've been in politics, as you know, now for 16 years. And I think it's wrong to assume anything about any gender or any group in terms of how they're going to behave. But surely the most important thing is to get everybody out to vote. That will be the interesting thing tonight, what the percentages are, how much of Montgomery County has showed up at the polls. Every place we've gone, they've had great numbers. And so I'm really looking forward to see how those turn out.
Okay. All right. Back to you in the studio.
Okay.
Yes. What do you think? All right. She wants us to go back to the...
All right, Doug, here's a threat. We're going to come back to you later in the evening. Stay put. Cindy.
But in the meantime, we want to talk with you all about Nancy Florine. She was all set to retire after the primary, but then got back into the race. Win or lose, do you think she's going to have an impact on this, on Montgomery County politics moving forward?
Well, certainly. She's a very outspoken person. In fact, when I was appearing for Montgomery Community Media's primary coverage back in June, as I was leaving the building, I ran into Nancy, who was coming in to sit at this table, and I said, "Boy, you are probably excited for this to be all over after the primary." And she said, "Oh, no, this is the exciting part. This is the fun part. I'm looking forward to it." So it doesn't surprise me if she continues to be a voice in this county after the election, regardless.
Kevin, is she a Democrat?
She's a Democrat. I think she's still a Democrat. I think that she has a dislike for her opponent, and that's the main reason she's in the race. I was here with Dan that night, and Nancy was here, and I was talking with Nancy in the green room before we came out, and she was excited for the results of that night to see where it was. And then I think as the night was going on, it was getting to be more and more not going the way that she wanted. And I don't know if it went different that night, or if when she decided to jump in, but she jumped in and she shook up the race, and we'll see what happens from here. But I don't expect her to be going away.
A lot of people are talking about the women's vote. and if she wins, she would be the first woman county executive. Have you talked to voters about whether that makes a difference in their vote for or against Nancy Florine?
Well, certainly. I've talked to voters who said, if given the choice between a man and a woman, I will pick the woman every time. Especially with everything that's been in the national news this year, I think it's something that's on voters' minds.
I think definitely the fact that having a woman on the council, having a woman as the county executive would be something that much of the county would want. I don't think a lot of county voters are going to say, "Oh, I'm definitely going to vote for her because she's a woman." I think I'd like to think voters are smart enough to look at the stances of people and their policy positions than just voting based on chromosomes.
We're going to talk to some Democrats in just a moment, but let me follow up on one thing you said. She has a dislike for her opponent. Rank and file Democrats are lining up in back of her opponent. How many of them are saying to their supporters privately, don't vote for him? And how many of them may share that dislike that Florine has but aren't saying it publicly?
I don't know. I'm not going to put... I could not even put a number on that. I think that...
Well, have you heard it?
I have not.
That's what people are saying.
Nobody knows Mark Elrich as well as the people who worked with him at the council. And I can imagine there are folks there who may feel very strongly about him running as executive.
Well, folks who feel very strongly about Mark Elrich are at his campaign headquarters right now, and that's where Mitty Hicks is. So we want to get with her and get the feel of what's happening over at Elrich's headquarters right now. Mitty?
There's a lot of excitement downtown Silver Spring. I'm here at the Veterans Plaza where Democrats are awaiting the results for both the county executive's race. We have Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is serving as tonight MCs. We also have Maryland's Attorney General Brian Frosh. Now there's a lot of excitement, a lot of food, a lot of dancing, a lot of music, and everything in between as everyone awaits for tonight's results. Now, I talked to some voters and some residents tonight who say they are very confident that Democrats are going to win back the House. They're very confident that Mark Elrich will be the winner here tonight. And some of the things that the residents said drove them here today are things like healthcare, and for some residents in Up County, I-270, traffic, and things like that. As I said, Jamie Raskin is actually hosting as tonight's MC. Mark Elrich just came here in the building as well. He said he's not ready to talk yet. He's a little afraid to really talk about tonight's the projected results. He said he's very confident that he may pull in become the next county executive. So we'll keep you all posted as we find out more. Back to you all in the studio.
All right, Minnie, we'll be checking back with you throughout the night. Let's face it, if every single candidate in that room doesn't win tonight, we're talking about history in Montgomery County politics. Too much of an overstatement?
I'm sorry, which room are you referring to?
All those Democrats.
All the Democrats that are with Mark Elrich tonight. So he's got Jamie Raskin among them.
Well, I'm sure most of those Democrats are in pretty safe seats here in Montgomery County and here in Maryland. It's the governor's race that I'm most concerned about, whether we're going to be seeing a Democrat winning in that race or whether Governor Hogan will get reelected.
But I think early on, there was so much momentum behind Governor Hogan, but Ben Jealous was really able over the summer and these last couple of weeks to get the momentum of the blue wave from the Democratic Party, the Maryland Democratic Party. Have you seen that in the areas where you're covering?
I have not.
Yeah.
I don't think there was ever a doubt that Governor Hogan was going to get reelected, especially from in the state. Maybe he may not pull Montgomery County, but I think there's little doubt that he's going to get reelected.
Yeah, I've seen some enthusiasm about him locally, but what I haven't seen is that translate to other parts of the state. It's interesting to see other Democratic gubernatorial candidates in other states that have a national profile right now, like Andrew Gillum in Florida or Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and Ben Jealous doesn't seem to even have that, and I think that's reflective of how people are viewing him at home.
Are there any issues predominant in people's minds in that race other than it's a referendum on the governor?
I think there are people worried about some of the sort of marquee Democratic Party issues right now, criminal justice issues, social and economic equity issues, and those are the things that are going to push Ben Jealous over the edge if he does.
Well, we're just now getting some results from Associated Press speaking of this particular race, and they're calling it for Larry Hogan.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. That's the first race we're able to call tonight, or at least from Associated Press.
Now the question is, are there any coattails for him? Presumably, if they're calling it that early, the numbers are rather substantial. Anybody going to benefit from Hogan's win here and win something they might not otherwise have won?
I mean, the one good thing I can say about Governor Hogan is that he knows when to keep his mouth shut in a time when some Republicans are very outspoken on social issues. And I think if there are other candidates around the state, and maybe even within the county, who can follow that template, they might do pretty well.
Yeah. Are you all surprised to see this early, this call made so early?
I'm not.
Not really,
I think
no.
that it was not. I don't think the governor was ever in jeopardy at any point. I think that Ben Jealous got some headlines, and he was a darling for a while. But I think once people started looking at what he is and where he came from, and then you look at what Hogan has accomplished, and he's walked that real tight line. He's thread the needle to make himself an acceptable candidate to a very blue state.
Considering how popular Larry Hogan is, could any Democratic candidate have beat him?
I had high hopes for Return Baker in Prince George's County. He has a very strong base there. He's spent a lot of time in the state in elected office, which is something that Ben Jealous cannot claim. And he had a good record there that he could use to parlay a statewide run, and it didn't happen in the primary, which is too bad because he might have won tonight.
Now you both saw this coming, so it's a question that I'm sure you've anticipated. With the results being what you expected them to be, what happens to Jealous now? And Republican governor of a blue state, what's the future for Governor Hogan?
I don't know what happens to Ben Jealous now. I don't think that he's going to do a whole lot in the state at this point. I think he may stick around and try to challenge again, but I don't see that happening personally. And as for Hogan, I think that he's still walking that tightrope. He's going to continue to walk that tightrope, and be the kind of the I wouldn't call him a rhino, but he's not exactly, he's certainly not Trump Republican.
Well, he may not be Trump Republican, but I'm wondering if this was a referendum by the Maryland voters. And certainly we spoke earlier to some Maryland voters about their impressions about Donald Trump, and here's what they had to say.
I do think people are very energized in this election. We live right next to the nation's capital here, and we are subject to all the press, all the news.
Okay, technical difficulties. That was the wrong tape. We'll come back to that one later, but we can come back to our conversation.
We
right
can
now.
ask you what we asked those voters on the street. Was there a Trump effect here in Maryland, either in the county or statewide?
No. No. I think the Trump effect, it certainly wasn't the positive Trump effect that Republicans or the GOP may have wanted. I think that...
well, except they got their Republican governor reelected.
But I don't think that Trump got Hogan elected. I think Hogan got Hogan elected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, Hogan and Trump are about as far apart as they can be on most issues.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's done a very good job of not taking the bait when he's been asked to and told to.
I think the backlash might have affected turnout in local races, which is something that, as somebody who writes about local issues, kind of frustrates me, because while I'm excited to see people turning out in response to what they see coming out of the White House, there is often a tendency to conflate national politics and national party politics with local issues and local politics, and I hope that people who are getting involved in local government races this year because of Donald Trump will actually stick around and help to do the work of running this community as community members and advocates and speaking up and stuff after the election.
Well, if he's known as working across the aisle and being as congenial as he is, did Hogan then benefit from people who were not happy with the way Mr. Trump conducts his business? Is it possible that the antipathy toward Trump translated to a Republican who is not Donald Trump?
Perhaps. I wouldn't be surprised if people start talking about Hogan running for president after he gets reelected, but I don't see him going to Iowa anytime soon.
We'll have to see how quickly he can get his things done in Annapolis. Well, let's talk about that. The impact of Hogan on Montgomery County specifically. Ben Jealous was critical of his record on schools and budgets for schools. Did we see that impact here in Montgomery County?
I think the major impact you saw was Hogan's transportation. He took a step forward for the county in putting the 495 and 270 transportation front and center. I think that certainly helped him in Montgomery County with voters, certainly up county voters who are sitting in traffic for hours a day.
Which is where you come from.
Which is where I am.
Well, I imagine it also hurt him with a lot of voters who live near 270 in the Beltway and were concerned that the widening might take their homes. And I definitely know that was a big motivator and may have been a big motivator in the down county for people to turn out against him. In fact, if you go on the Beltway near the Georgia Avenue exit, somebody has a giant Ben Jealous sign in their backyard perched on top of the sound wall because they know that this race could possibly determine the fate of their house.
Robin Ficker, in his campaign, made a big deal of the fact that he's going to be able to get along better with Governor Hogan than his Democratic candidates. First of all, in your experience, does that argument make sense? And if so, is it an argument that you think may have penetrated some viewers' psyches before they voted today?
I think it's a good argument to make. It's nice when you can say I've got the ear of the governor. And he likes me. Whether that makes you the candidate you want to vote for, I don't know. Because Hogan has already established that he can work with anybody. That's what the last 4 years have shown, that he can work with folks from the other side of the aisle.
I think that's why he got so many Democratic supporters.
Exactly.
Right. He can work across the aisle.
I think there are arguments to be made that Governor Hogan has already, been listening to Montgomery County, depending on how you view the issues. He did give the county the purple line, which, I imagine placated a lot of voters in the county. And he has, some friendships among Democrats in the county, notably Peter Franchot, who might be one of his biggest Democratic supporters, and Judd Ashman in Gaithersburg, who's on the city council there.
True.
He definitely has friends among the Democratic establishment in Montgomery County already.
A lot of people would say that, as blue a state as Maryland is, having a Republican governor is actually good for the state because you've got some kind of balance. Would you agree with that?
Sure. I mean, it certainly puts a check on what's going on in Annapolis, in the State House, and in the legislature. I think that it's kind of an anomaly. It doesn't really always work out that way. Depending on what happens tonight and who gets elected statewide for those Senate and delegate seats, it could create roadblocks, could create the gridlock that we've seen in the past at the national level.
That is a big issue. The Democrats are potentially at risk of losing their veto-proof majority in the General Assembly, which could give Governor Hogan a lot more leverage that he hasn't had in the past. And that might actually be a bigger issue than the governor's race, because we already know what happens when there's a Republican governor and Democratic General Assembly. We don't know what happens when the Democrats can simply brush off anything that he tries to do.
Well,
gentlemen, at this point, one final question to each of you. Right now, at this moment, what's the big thing to look for as the evening progresses?
I think the big thing to look for is the size of the margin in the county executive race. I think that's going to be the most interesting thing to come out of tonight.
And not only the margin, but who the winner will be. I mean, we have no idea.
Yeah, whoever wins, I would bet money they will get a primary challenger in 2022.
No matter who.
No matter who.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up this segment of our program, but first, of course, we want to thank both of you. It's been a real pleasure to have you both with us, Kevin O'Rourke and Dan Reed, for joining our discussion tonight. It's really been fantastic, very eye-opening, illuminating, and we were here together when we found out that Larry Hogan is going to be our governor again.
Yeah. And we were right. We told you that one was good looking and one was smart.
They're both smart and they're both handsome, so thank you again.
When we come back, Cindy and I are going to be joined by two other people who know this county very, very well, county political insiders who will share their insights about some of the state races tonight. We'll be back. Join us then.
We don't all start in the same place, but we all deserve the same chance. Montgomery College graduates, rise up and say, I am MC. If you are the first in your family graduating from college, worked while attending college, are a military veteran, service member, or reservist, education empowers you to make an impact on your life, your family, your community, and the world.
I felt the bite at age 16.
I felt the bite at age 4.
We've all felt the bite of Charcot-Marie tooth, and we are fighting back.
Charcot-Marie tooth is the most commonly inherited nerve disease. If you or a loved one has CMT, go to cmtausa.org and help take a bite out of CMT.
See on page 4 that the projections need to be blood. Next Thursday?
Seriously? Thursday? Can't do that.
This is really inconvenient.
I have yoga that day. I have no time for this. So.
I can't do Thursday, but I can do Friday.
Disasters don't plan ahead. You can. Talk to your loved ones about how you're going to be ready in an emergency. Don't wait. Communicate.
MCM, your community media center, is making Montgomery County a great place to live through programs like 21 This Week. Montgomery County's hardest-hitting political talk show keeps you up to date with the local political scene. Montgomery Community Media. Our middle name is Community.
Well, we've been telling our son it's a really important day to vote because this is how our voices is heard, and a lot of people fought and died for this right.
It's always important to take action in the political system. When you're a part of it, it affects you. It affects everyone around here.
It's important for me to vote in the midterm elections and in all elections because it's a part of my birthright as an American.
Any voting time is very important. Mid-election, whole election, it doesn't matter. Any time that you're supposed to do your civic duty is important.
I think our voices need to be heard, especially our generation that is coming up. It affects us as well because we're done with school and we're in the work field now, so this really matters to us.
The very fabric of our society is under siege. It's always important to vote, but never more so than this election.
If we don't vote, our voices aren't heard. And it's important for every vote to count.
We have to make changes. The way the country is going, we have to make changes. So it's very important for all the community to come out and vote.
We'll have a bright future, but everybody have to be involved to get that bright future.
I feel as though there's a lot more violence and hatred over the last 2 years. And I'm trying to do what I can by voting to hopefully prevent that.
We are scared. We are scared about what is going on. That's why I come out to vote so that we can get a change.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, you are watching Montgomery Community Media's election coverage. My name is Cindy Pena, and I'm here with my good friend and fellow journalist, Gary Nurnberg.
And there's stuff happening.
Absolutely. Well, we already know, we got results from the Associated Press that Larry Hogan has been reelected for another term as Maryland's governor. But unfortunately, we're not getting results back from Montgomery County, and that's because even though the polls are supposed to close at 8 o'clock, they're still open because they're accommodating the hundreds and hundreds of people that have been waiting in line all night to vote. And so the polls are not actually closed.
Same is true in the state of Maryland, which originally put up some election results and then brought them down immediately because polls statewide are having the same crowding problems that we're having here in Montgomery County.
Imagine that, and it's a midterm election, not a presidential election, but a midterm election, and apparently that's happening not just in the county, but the state and across the country.
So we just have to wait a little bit longer for results, which means
we get to talk more.
They're going to be more fun. Well, to talk about more about this and what we're seeing so far, we're joined by two panelists who know a lot about politics in Montgomery County. Tracy Terrell is a political activist and the former president of the organization Black Democrats of Montgomery County. She's also doing stuff currently. And joining us also is John Herson, the former majority leader of the Maryland House of Delegates and a Tacoma Park native. Both of you, what does this crowding mean?
It's good.
It's a good sign.
It's a good sign.
Especially for a midterm election.
Yeah.
Seeing results, I mean, in Montgomery County in 2014, I think in the early vote, we had about 5% of the people actually cast a vote in 2014, and this year it was close to 17%. So it's a good thing.
It's a lot of interest. I mean, what's bad about more people coming to vote? I mean, that's a good thing.
Absolutely nothing. That's
right. You know, it's a good thing. So having more interest, and I think this is going to be reflected across the country.
Mm-hmm. One of the numbers is young voter turnout in Montgomery County tripled. Yep. Young voter turnout tripled since the last midterms in 2014. What does that mean?
I think it means that young people have kind of, oh yeah, this actually matters. Kind of, they've woken up to it. The question is that going to be something that replicates itself across the country? We think it is, but you know, the participation rates of young people, millennials, if you will, has not been great. But you know, this election might be different.
I hope so. I really hope that this election is the beginning of it not being cool not to vote.
Correct.
I mean, like, you know, you wear your seatbelt, well, you go vote every time you have an opportunity.
Right. Right. It's going to be cool to vote.
Exactly.
That's what it, you know, and that's, I think, important.
Exactly.
And I think some of the issues sort of forced the millennials into the vote. The Parkland shooting, where they began to organize and really try and get out the vote. They did a massive get out the vote effort. They, even at the march, they were registering voters. They said it wasn't only about the march. You had to. They wanted you to cast a vote. Yeah. So it sort of kept going. We weren't sure whether that would keep going or not, but it did.
So in Montgomery County, among younger voters, self-generated rather than driven by a particular campaign or candidate?
Oh, I think so.
I think so.
Yeah, I don't think the campaigns this time around were the thing that motivated young people. It was more of the national issues that motivated them. I mean, you go all the way back to the Women's March, right after the inauguration of Mr. Trump. I mean, there's just been an activism that's been building, and it's filtered down to younger people, especially with Parkland. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's been a eye opener for a lot of young people. I know my kids have been much more activated in the last 2 years than they were before.
Well, they see what happens when they don't vote.
Correct.
Right. Let's talk a bit about the Maryland state election and the governor's race. I mean, you all have experience there, and what are your impressions of Larry Hogan winning re-election and doing it so early? I mean, they called this race really early on.
I think the polls showed that it was expected that Larry Hogan, it was always expected that he would win the election. Obviously, people hoped that the blue wave would carry Ben Jealous over the finish line and that he would win. But Larry Hogan does a very good job of not being quite as divisive, I would say, as when we had Ehrlich. Yeah. He walks the line a little better, and he does reach across the aisle. So I think it's a little different this time around.
Yeah, let me say one thing I think that people don't realize about this state. I think people don't realize this state is more of a centrist state than people realize. I mean, we've got Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Baltimore City, the center of the state. Yeah, it's liberal Democratic, but there are two other parts of the state, the Eastern Shore and Western Maryland, which are very conservative. So when you add it all together, it's a kind of a centrist state. And Larry Hogan has played right into that and realizes that, and has worked with the Democratic leadership in the legislature, which is very Democratic. I mean, the legislature is, very Democratic. That's another big issue, is whether or not it's going to, there are some efforts to maybe change some of those Senate votes, Senate positions, so that it isn't a veto-proof Senate anymore. But the point is, Larry Hogan has realized it's a centrist state, and he's learned how to govern in that kind of environment, and not just to play to the left or the right. And he's a centrist.
And I think, I'm sorry.
No,
I think the other thing we're looking for, as John said, is whether Larry Hogan will have any coattails, whether he can bring in a few Republicans, especially at the state Senate level, to prevent, so that so that the Senate doesn't have a veto-proof majority.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to actually pause this conversation really quickly to go and find out how Mark Elrich is doing at his campaign headquarters with our own Mitty Hicks, who is with him right now. Mitty, take it away.
I'm here with Democratic candidate for Montgomery County Executive, Mark Elrich. Mark Elrich, good to see you.
Good to see you, Tim.
Tell me a little bit. Tell me what's your overall feeling here tonight?
Right now, I feel pretty good. It's only the early vote, but the early vote usually presages the day of the election voting. So it's hard not to feel at least halfway good.
Good. And in the primary election, you talked about a transition team, and you said that you would consider your then opponent, David Blair, on your transition team.
Yeah.
Would you consider Nancy Floreen on your transition team?
No, I would not. I mean, David Blair is a business person, and he has something to contribute. If I want advice on development, I'll invite somebody who's actually a developer to the transition team, not Nancy.
And you're the projected winner tonight. If you do win this office, what's going to be some of your first priorities as county executive?
Well, first I have to put together a transition team. I've got to interview people for the next administration. I'm going to ask my friend Sidney Katz to set up this committee to basically benchmark Montgomery County's business practices against everybody else's, because I think that's important. It's something I promised people I'd do. And I think it's something we can do quick and then get real results from it quickly. And I'm going to bring together a group of people to look at early childhood to figure out how quickly we can begin implementing something significant in early childhood, so we can reduce the number of kids who are starting school unprepared for kindergarten. 75% of our kids are not kindergarten ready. That's unacceptable.
And my last question is, what's your reaction here tonight, seeing all these people, young and old? It's a diverse group. What's your reaction here tonight?
I think it says a lot who my support is. It's young and old and a diverse group of people who really care about the county. Not people who have any particular special interest, but people who care about the quality of life, the schools their kids go to, the traffic they have to put up with, all those things. And I think it says a lot about what my campaign's been about. I'm really happy you're here.
Great. Well, we're going to throw it back to you in the studio, but for now, I'm Mitty Hicks reporting live in downtown Silver Spring.
All right. Thank you, Mitty. Thank you, Mitty. And it sounds like Mark Elrich is calling himself a winner tonight. I mean, he sounds
like
very confident talking about his transition team and plans for his new administration. Is he doing this too soon?
Personally, I don't think so. I mean, I think there was a clear sense in the county that it was going to be hard to beat the Democratic nominee. Although I think Nancy, Floreen put up a very, very strong effort. But the bottom line is, all the Democratic establishment in the county came in behind Mark and said, look, he's the Democratic nominee and we need to support him. So
two colleagues on that council for years. Are you surprised by the vehemence with which Elrich answered the question, about a role for Floreen in the transition, and essentially his saying, get lost, lady?
I think...
Go ahead.
I think it would be probably unlikely that Mark Elrich, especially since they were colleagues on the council, he won the Democratic primary, and she had always been a Democrat, and then she became an independent to run against him, that he would suddenly put her on the transition team.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's not surprising that on election night, this is his reaction. It may soften a little bit over time. I mean,
Well, what was their relationship like on the council?
it wasn't great. I mean, it was, you know, there are a lot of issues that many of the council members, not just Nancy had with Mark. You know, of all the council members, he was never president of the council, which is a position chosen by the other council members. But the bottom line is he has won repeatedly countywide and repeatedly been supported by the Democratic Party in elections. And I think there'll be a little time over which people's nerves and feelings will get modified. You know, they're all pulling for the county, so I think at some point this will pass.
Put the county before the party is what Florine says.
Well,
Elric told Bethesda Magazine that his #1 priority was reorganizing county government. What does that mean, and what can we expect?
I don't know.
Well, I don't either. And how can we be here on election night when he's saying one of the most important priorities is reorganizing county government, and none of us knows what the heck that means?
I think there's a lot of money that they want to save in reorganization. Again, this is very much what a new administration is going to do and say at the very beginning. We'll see what happens.
Tracy?
I think they'll look at things that perhaps, like the 311, where there have been some complaints and things like that, and see if there needs to be some reorganization, some change in how that is administered. I think, you know, in some of the business world, in how they handle contracts and things like that, there may be some areas where they want to look at reorganizing, but I don't think he means a drastic reorganization of the county government.
It's not that easy.
Yeah.
So the campaign statement, the #1 priority is one of the chief priorities, rather, is the reorganization of county government, overstated. We're going to see some trimming here and there. We're not going to see a restructuring and a new Department of Coal or a new Department of Development with different responsibilities.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I think what you're going to see is a real, and Mark's been at this for a long time. He's been on the council a long time, has a really good understanding of all the pieces of the county government. I can see him making some interesting choices in terms of appointments. But it's a big, big government, and I think there'll be a way for him to, you know, really decide what's important and what isn't. And I mean, the big issue at the county government level, in my opinion, is how do you match up the desires of the council with what you need to do with the school system? Because they're really different. They don't really control each other in the sense, and it's the biggest piece of the pie in terms of money.
And it's a big priority for a
Yes,
lot of
for a
people
lot
in
of
Montgomery,
people, right.
in Montgomery County.
Right.
And he's a former school teacher.
Correct.
Right? So he has his heart in schools in
Correct.
Montgomery County.
Correct.
And some people might say that Florine has her heart in developers' pockets.
Right.
And so therefore we might have a bit of a priority difference between the two. Right. And I wonder if that's what voters are going to be looking for, or what they were looking for when they were deciding between the two.
We'll have to see the level of the vote. As we sit here and talk about it, unfortunately,
and we don't have the results.
We don't know the
we
numbers.
don't have the numbers yet because the polls aren't closed.
But I would say if you have a really, really strong vote for Ehrlich and not such a strong vote for Nancy Florine, there's a message there about development in this county and transportation and things like that, traffic. I mean, there's a real message there. So,
well, say that message out loud.
The message is people are tired of all the development and they don't feel like we're paying attention to traffic issues in the county.
Or that they're not holding the developers accountable
Correct.
for paying for the infrastructure
Correct.
to handle all the new traffic.
I think it depends on the numbers. I mean, if it's really close.
If it's close, maybe not, but if it's
Yeah.
like 60% or over.
20 or something, I mean, there's a message there.
There's a referendum against development,
Correct.
overdevelopment.
Correct.
Yeah.
All politicians have strengths and weaknesses. You both know Mark Elrich well, and if you watch his political career. Looking forward, what are the potential pitfalls for him, given his weaknesses? What are the mistakes you anticipate he could make, and how would you recommend that he avoid those?
First?
Somebody pointed at you, Tracy.
I know.
And pointing at each other.
I think in appointments, I think in as you appoint people to the various positions to head the agencies, you need to sometimes appoint people who don't always think like you, so you get a second opinion. And I'm going to go back to a certain county executive who is the current county executive at the moment. And in one of his agencies, he actually did appoint his opponent from that election. And Steve Silverman was in the county government. So I think it's sometimes helpful to have someone that doesn't think exactly like you to be able to sit at that table and say, you know, you may want to think about it this way. And
so he surrounds himself with people like that.
Here's the other thing I think is really important that Mark is going to have to, I think, learn. When you're a council member, you can say yes to everybody. In other words, oh yeah, I'll vote. I'll go with you. I'll go with you. You can always be the no vote. When you're county executive, you can't do that anymore. You've got to decide which direction to go. You got to organize coalitions to do it. That's a different role. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Mark does that.
But a lot of people have said that that's been his strength throughout this campaign, that he hasn't backed down from his original set of priorities.
No, he hasn't, but he's been able to say no to all the votes. In other words, this, sector plan comes up. And if he has a group of, neighborhoods who are against it, then he says, fine, I'll go with them and I'll vote no on the sector plan. He can't do that anymore. He's got to start saying, this is where I want to go, and organize groups to say yes. It's a different role.
It's a different role.
And it's going to be a challenge for him, in my opinion.
And what about for Nancy Florine? Do you think she would have been up to that challenge?
I think, Nancy was head of the committee that did all the planning. So the planning committee, I can't remember.
Planning commission.
Yeah, planning commission. Well, she was on the planning commission, but then there was actually the subcommittee or whatever it is of the council. She was the planning person, and she had to kind of organize that stuff. And she couldn't say no. If the sector plan got out of her committee, she's got to vote for it. Mark would vote against it. So the question is, how do you say yes? How do you organize people to say yes? Where do you want to go? How do you get the developers to do what you want them to do? You can't say no anymore. You've got to be a leader. So
I'm reading into your statements, and tell me if I'm taking it too far, that you're not convinced it is a skill set that he has.
I think he has the skill set. Don't take that what I'm saying. I think he has the skill set. He has shown his skill set through this campaign. Let me tell you that right off the bat. He spent $700,000 up against $4 million from David Blair, another $1 million from Nancy Florine and her supporters. He has shown leadership here in this campaign. The question is, how do you translate that into really making a government work?
Let me go back a moment to something that Tracy said a moment ago. Tracy, you talked about the importance of appointments. And throughout this campaign, Elrich has not made it a secret that he will, quote, consult with unions before bringing people into the administration or making appointments. Many have read that to say that he is too beholden to unions. Is that an overdrawn conclusion? And what difficulty do you see, if any, coming from his promise to, quote, consult with unions on these appointments?
McGeo and the county unions are a very strong presence in Montgomery County. I don't think there's a problem with consulting with the unions. I don't know that every appointment will be to their liking, but I do think I don't think there's a problem with consulting with them. They are a big presence. That's who works at the agency. So I don't think that's an issue. I don't know.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I think it's been a misreading of his statement. Yeah. Every county executive consults with the unions when they're making these appointments. I mean, they'd be crazy if they didn't. I mean, I think that what was taken out of context was he said, well, they'll sit in on the interviews. Well, that's maybe a step too far. I mean, they're going to consult with the unions when they make these appointments. That's going to happen. And every county executive
is going to do that.
Is that why they gave him money? Well, they didn't give it directly to him because he was part of that public finance law. Right. But they found a way to support a PAC.
Look, they also supported him, and I mean, campaign financing the way it is in the country now, there's no way he can prevent people from spending money the same way Ben Jealous couldn't prevent people from spending money on his behalf that he didn't consult with them. So.
And so what do we think about the public financing law? Is that a farce then?
I don't think so. I mean, I think he spent $700,000. He had over $5 million spent against him. He's now the county executive. I think there's an argument that in some ways it worked. It's not perfect by any means, but I'm not convinced that it's bad.
Well, we don't know that he's the county executive.
We don't.
We
That's
don't know. But, all right. Well, we're just now hearing that Nancy Florine is about to address the folks at her headquarters, so we're going to take that live right now. Okay, too bad. Technical difficulties. We're going to continue on with our conversation.
Before we started talking about Mark Eller and following the lifestyle we saw him a moment ago, we're talking about the turnout in the state. In midterm elections, you don't get big turnout unless there's some screamingly important issue. And yet that doesn't seem to be the case here in the state of Maryland this year. Why is turnout so large?
You can take this one first.
I would just say generally the mood in the country. And we got to remember that we're a state that's like cozies up right next to Washington, D.C., and we have lots of people who work in the federal government. And, you know, I think we're maybe a little bit more influenced with the national mood just because we're so close to it physically. And
I have to interrupt you. Remember that technical problem we had? We
fixed it.
Nancy Florine is talking. Let's listen.
We have had over 700 volunteers. Can you believe that? This campaign has taken 120 days. This is unprecedented. We have indeed disrupted things here in Montgomery County, but sometimes you have to do that to have a real conversation about who we are and what our future is. But in that 120 days, do you know we collected over 20,000 signatures? We were only certified as, I was only certified as a candidate 76 days ago. And in that time, altogether, we have raised about $930,000. We have had an outpouring of support from every corner of Montgomery County. And for that, I am so deeply grateful and humbled. You know, together we can make this a wonderful place. We are doing that now just by your enthusiasm, by your spirit, and by your commitment. This is who we are here in Montgomery County, is it not? Yes! Yes! So, you know, the statistics are incredible, and it is a statement of how much Montgomery County residents want to be engaged, want to play a role, and want to be part of our future. So we'll see how the numbers turn out tonight, but at the end of the day, just know that you have made history. We have done this, and we're going to continue to do it. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll stay tuned. As usual, I have blown it. I have forgotten to thank some of the credible people. Most of all, my husband, David Stewart, wherever he is. Oh, there he is. No wonder I couldn't see you. My incredible team here, Sally Sternbach, who agreed to be the chair of this committee in a 5-minute conversation on a hot day in July. Joyce Furman, likewise, my treasurer, stepped into the breach. Raquel Montenegro, the gift from God that we know Raquel is, with her kindness and generosity of spirit. Sarah Vanderwert, our communications director. Thank you, Marilyn Balcom, for bringing us Sarah. And of course, my dear friend, Rich Parsons, who has been a friend since 2002, since I first got into this world of this crazy world of politics. And then all the rest of you, all the folks who put on meet and greets, who've been at the polls today, you know, we've gone full circle. Remember that petition drive? Remember the rain? Well, it came back. That's the nature of this campaign. At least we have been consistent in our experience. And it's kind of ironic. The rainiest campaign ever, but the most signatures achieved ever. And incredible effort across the board. So thank you very much, and stay tuned. We'll see when we have more to say. Thank you. Take care.
Well, that's the message of the night. Stay tuned. And also Politics 101. Never forget to thank your husband, because if you don't win the election, you may not have anything to do tomorrow. And never forget to thank your treasurer, who in this case brought in almost $1 million in 76 days. Stay tuned because of this. Stay tuned because the State Board of Elections, as of 9 o'clock, said that all the polling places in the state were still open. The State Board of Elections has told all the counties, do not release any solid results yet. The reason that at 9 o'clock those polling stations were still open, in some cases overcrowding, people still in line and still voting, as we know, as late as 9:40 and perhaps now still, and also some technical issues at some of the polling places in the state. Given that combination of overcrowding and those technical issues, the state has told the counties, don't release hard numbers yet. We're not going to do it either at the state level. So we can't give you the hard numbers, and so Ms. Florine is right. Stay tuned.
And so the Maryland State Board of Elections and the Montgomery County Board of Elections have both closed down their sites. There are no numbers even if you go online. And so we continue our discussion because primarily the reason for this delay and the reason why the polls are still open at 10 o'clock in the evening is because of the voter turnout. How incredible is this? It's historic.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is absolutely historic. And again, I go back to the idea that, you know, we are the state that cozies right up to the national capital, you know, and we may feel more of the anxiety and the angst of this country than a lot of other states do right next door. So I think a lot of our people get very concerned about these issues and are ready to vote.
And Tracy, some closing thoughts on the election and or voter turnout.
I think for one, I'm happy to see a midterm election with this kind of voter turnout. And as John said, I think it's because we cozy up to Washington, D.C., and we see the national media probably more than most states do. And some of the things that are going on in the nation, I think, drove voter turnout. Not so much what was happening in Maryland, but what was actually happening at the national level.
Exactly.
Thank you two very much. You going to stay up late? Or are you going to wait till the morning?
Yeah, my day job is in public affairs, so I'll be up very late.
And up very early. It might be an all-nighter.
Yes, it probably will.
Well, thank you, Tracy and John, for joining us tonight and
Thank
sharing
you.
all of your insights. It was really a terrific time to have you here. I'm sorry we didn't have any numbers, but, you know, voting is a good thing. And we, like you said, voting is the new cool.
It is the new cool.
Right? Okay. All right. When we come back,
More cool.
Yeah, more cool. And more election results. We're going to check in live with the folks over at the Republican and independent candidates for county executive.
Some.
MCM, your community media center, is making Montgomery County a great place to live through programs like Manage Your Damn Money. Malcolm and Ben teach us how to save money and reach our personal financial goals. Montgomery Community Media. Our middle name is Community.
This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Remember that to love America is to love all Americans, because love has no labels.
Hey, you.
Yeah, you. Getting that college education? What are you gonna do? Graduate and take some office job? Be like everybody else? Or will you dare do something different? Like, be a teacher. You could be my teacher. You got the skills. The smarts? Yes, you. You could be the teacher I never forget. That'd be cool. Does that corporate job even have recess? What are you gonna make of yourself? What are you gonna make of me? Testing. Why did the girl ask the mushroom to dance? Because he was a fun guy.
Why is Montgomery College the place for you? MC is an 18-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio and convenient day, evening, weekend, and online classes. Montgomery College provides academic and career support services to help you reach your goals. MC students come from more than 160 countries. MC has transfer agreements with more than 40 colleges and universities. MC provides career planning services to jumpstart your career. Call or visit us online to make your move today.
And hello, everyone. This is Montgomery Community Media's election night coverage live here in Rockville. I'm Cindy Pena, along with Gary Nuremberg.
And the two of us have the easiest jobs in the world. You and I have both been reporters at party headquarters where we run around all night long trying to get somebody to come stand with us and talk about the importance of things that we don't know about yet. Mitty Hicks is doing that right now with the Democratic candidate for Attorney General, Brian Frosch. Mitty, what's happening?
Maryland Attorney General. I'm here with Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosch, and he's also running for his seat for re-election. Mr. Frosch, if you are elected here tonight, tell me what are going to be some of your priorities once in your next term.
Well, we have a lot of work left to do. We're prosecuting criminals, we're recovering money for consumers and for the state, and we're fighting some of the worst acts of the Trump administration. We're suing Donald Trump because he's violating the nation's original anti-corruption law. He's trying to take away representatives from Maryland and other blue states by using the census to get people not to report. He'll take away money from our state for transportation, for health, for housing. And so we have a lot left to do, and things are looking good tonight. I'm very optimistic.
You say you're very optimistic. Tell us why. Is it the audience here tonight?
No. I mean, look, there are some early returns. The early returns are skewing our way big. But we're waiting for people in Prince George's County to finish voting. So at the end of that day.
And just tell me a little bit about your reaction here tonight.
About what tonight?
Tell me about your reaction here tonight. All these people here.
I can't tell. I mean, there are a lot of folks here. I just got here, about to head up on the stage.
Well, Mr. Frosch has to go back up to the stage to join Congressman Jamie Raskin. He's not yet calling it if he's the winner tonight, but as you said, some of the things that he's working on, if he is elected, is going to be going against the Trump administration. Reporting live in downtown Silver Spring, I'm Mitty Hicks from my MC Media.
All right, Mitty, go running around and find us somebody else. Joining us to talk about tonight's historic Montgomery County election are the host and moderator of MCM's 21 This Week, Casey Aiken, and his show's frequent guest, and the woman he fights with most often on the air, Susan Heltemus. Susan, you may be able to give us some insight about what's happening statewide, or at least here in Montgomery County, with overcrowding and why the election results have been delayed. What do you hear?
Well, I talked to the president of the Board of Elections, Jim Shalik, just before we came on air, and I talked with him a couple of times earlier in the night, and Montgomery County may still have a precinct or two voting, and the state said, you know, as long as there are people voting anywhere in the state, you know, you can't release any data. So they're struggling with the state, and lines were incredibly long at the end of the day all over the county. And as long as you're in line at 8 o'clock, and I heard you talk earlier about the reason for the voter turnout, having been at polls for a good part of early voting and all day today, I think I can say with pretty good certainty on both sides of the all the parties, is it's in a response to the president. Talking today, I was right near the Republican table, and there were Democrats and unaffiliated, and it's their different responses, and that's why they're out there. But I do have something else. Someone sent me an email just before I came out, and WTOP.com got the results from the early voting. they put it on their website, and this person caught it, and I don't know if they've taken it down. But for the county exec race, it is Mark with 68%, Nancy Florine with 20%, and Robin Ficker with 12%.
But they've taken that down.
They've taken it down, but that was early voting, and nobody knows how WTOP got it, but they had it, and those are the numbers. Those are I'm just kind of shocked.
Well,
actually,
but we're all, I think, kind of shocked about the fact that we don't have any numbers at all right now, and that the polls are still open, and that we're seeing, problems with ballots, not enough ballots at some polling places. And Casey, that's what you were talking about.
Massive problems in Prince George's County with at least 3 polling places where they ran out of ballots. And in Upper Marlboro, the polling place in Upper Marlboro, there was a 2.5-hour wait for ballots to be delivered.
Let me interrupt you. We've got something breaking. We're going to come back to you in a second. Aquanette Crosby, you've got a big one for us. What do you got?
We're still here at Robin Ficker's watch party where things have thinned out just a little bit. Here with me now is Alexander Bush. Now, he is the incoming chairman of the Republican Party here in Montgomery County. So high hopes still for Robin's chances?
Well, if there is a year to be hopeful, this is it. Republican county executive candidates usually poll in the low 30s, and we've got 2 basically Democratic candidates to split the vote and just give us that perfect margin of victory to get in there.
Okay, so still being optimistic. What changes have you seen in this election with voters?
Well, the big difference has been the number of people who usually vote straight party ticket Democrat, who, because of Governor Hogan and in the very centrist, very caring way he's governed, are looking to vote for a Republican. And what we're trying to do on the county level is expand that and say, well, you looked at him as an individual, you saw that he did a good job and he cares, and we hope people will do that with the races further down the ballot.
Okay, so what other voter trends are you seeing?
We've seen a huge spike in the number of absentee ballot registrations, especially from people who usually don't vote at all. So this is low propensity voters, younger voters, college students. It's a wave. It's a 5-time spike in the number of absentee ballots. We don't know whether it's a blue wave yet, though.
Okay, so what's the bigger picture with all of this?
Well, the bigger picture is because these are a lot of people who have never voted, we still don't know how they're going to vote. They've been mostly signed up by Democratic campaigns. They're hoping they'll vote Democrat. I think the question is, when they go into that ballot for the first time and they think Republican, are they thinking the party of Hogan, or are they thinking the party of Trump? Because in Montgomery County, we know which way we need them to think.
Have you ever seen anything like this in Maryland politics where somebody like Hogan can make such a difference in how voters are reacting at the polls?
I think historically, no one ever thought that. I think we always thought if we have a governor, we're lucky. We have 4 years of a governor. I think the really interesting thing is how hopeful people were going into it that, oh no, he's going to be a 2-term governor.
Well, thank you so much, Alexander. As he was saying, everybody here is still very hopeful. We are still watching and waiting. Here at LaHinch, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
Minnie, thank you very much. Casey, you heard that interview, whistling in the wind or reality?
Well, it's very much a reality here in the state of Maryland. Maryland is a unique state when it comes to politics. The Republican Party has struggled. It has It has about a third of the registered voters as the Democratic Party, and any inroads that Republicans can make, they take as an accomplishment and achievement. The fact that Larry Hogan has been able to craft 2 victorious gubernatorial campaigns is rather remarkable here in this state.
Susan, let's get back to the what you were talking about before we went over to Robin Ficker's headquarters, and that is the numbers for the county executive race.
Okay, well, there's something. There are more independents in Montgomery County now than Republicans. So when you look at that, I am blown away by the margin of Mark's early voting. 68%. I think Nancy's going to pick up, but from what I saw in early voting and today, there was a good response from women and Republicans who came up to me, and one man put it Robin Ficker's an idiot. I can't vote for him. So I'm not surprised his is so low from this because, you know, people today were joking Jim Shalik should be running. So Jim Shalik ran last time and he had 37. He was a saner candidate. And I would have thought Nancy would have done better. She's been around 16 years.
Do you think Nancy would have taken the Republican vote away from Robin Ficker?
Yes, she was.
Well, that was her strategy. I mean, she had to make inroads into the Republican vote because she was not well embraced by the Democratic Party by running as an independent. There were a lot of Democrats. I had panelists on our television show who were livid with the fact that she broke with the party and ran as an independent. And even though her statement that she was going to come back to the Democratic Party if she was elected really was an attempt to mollify some of that anger at her.
I think that a big difference in this race, which I don't think anybody when she first entered the race would have known, is that for the first time in a long time, and it's being done across the nation, Maryland had a united Democratic campaign. There was money that was given, like $85,000 or something like that, from the National Party. But there were offices throughout the state. There were 50 to 60 Democratic operatives across the state working for the Democratic Party, top on down. And what's interesting is the slogan was "Vote Democratic," and there was a sign out there that said something or other about "Defeat Trump, vote Democratic." And it was visceral in a lot of people. And they came in and people said over and over, "I'm voting Democratic, I'm voting Democratic, I'm not voting anything else." And that is very hard. I mean, Anthony Brown is probably crying tonight in his beer because when he ran 4 years ago, he had no help. No help. The party just.
Susan, it was a different time.
It was a different time, but
I mean,
never
be apples and oranges.
Well, no, because
Susan.
the Democrats were not organized across the state, and they were this time, and they've done it a few times before, but it's been a while.
Well, but that's just driving turnout. That's not driving results. That's driving turnout. That to your question earlier.
It's both.
No, to your question about it, why is there so many people voting? Susan answered, it's the president. It is the president. The president is driving the turnout on both sides of the aisle. This is what's driving the turnout. You can't when you look at 2014 and the number of people who voted in early voting, it was 35,000 people in Montgomery County. It was 113,000 this year. The voters were coming out on both sides.
But even then, if you just leave the numbers the way they were, forget that. There was no organized party.
Who cares?
And you have to give Kathleen Matthews credit for that. She has worked very, very
Susan,
hard.
The Democrats control the state. Who cares if there's an organized effort?
You would not get turnout like this if you hadn't
Susan, you didn't. Kathleen Matthews could have stayed in her home and gotten the turnout this time.
Casey, you do not know what is going on.
Do you read the Washington Post?
No. Casey, you don't know the organizing that's been every day of the week, every weekend, all day long, knocking on doors, phone calls.
It didn't help Ben Jealous.
Well, you guys obviously have a love-hate relationship.
There was a competitive race where there was one competitive race in the state between a Republican and a Democrat.
And
it didn't help the Democratic candidate.
But you know what? We don't have the result yet. And if the votes are coming in as high as they are, and and they keep voting. I mean, there could be a miracle.
Well, that's typical of Democrats. They keep voting until they win.
And praying. Well, like I said, you have a love-hate relationship, and I wonder if Maryland voters have a love-hate relationship with the Republican governor. They may not love voting for him, or they may not hate him, but they like him in office, and so therefore they voted for him a second time.
Well, the person who's the head of Democrats for Hogan is right here in Montgomery County, and if you watched his ads, a lot of them focused on Democrats, and what they talked about was we don't have to pay both ways on the bridge. He released the bridge, lowered the rates on the bridge, and
look, Larry Hogan is a genius politician. He understood the mood of Marylanders 4 years ago. He understood that they were fed up with high taxes, and they were fed up with the way the government under Martin O'Malley had directed them. He understood, and he reacted to it, and he ran a great campaign. And he's run a great campaign ever since in 2016. He kept his distance as far away as he could from Donald Trump or whoever was the Republican candidate, because he understood the state. This state would not tolerate that type of reaction. So it's really, you have to look at the genius of Larry Hogan when you say Marylanders are happy with with where they are right now. We've had years of growth. We've had no taxes were raised during the Hogan administration. They're happy with that.
And the other thing that makes a difference too is shortly after he came into office, he had cancer. Everybody fell in love with Larry Hogan, the fighter, and that was in one of his commercials that was loving. They show him when he needed us, we were there, and when we needed him, he was there. And that people still talk about the fact that he's such a great guy. You beat cancer, and he was so human about it, and he was so public about it. And I think a lot of people were just endeared to him. As Casey said, he hasn't messed up. I think there are a lot of Democrats who wish that he would speak up a little more against the current administration. He does it when it's really egregious, but he tempers it, and Democrats are mollified when he does it once in a while, and the Republicans, well, he's okay.
So despite the blue wave, could any Democratic candidate have beat Larry Hogan?
I don't know. I think that the candidate who came in second, Rushern Baker, would have had a better chance. He was from Prince George's. He's sort of the ordinary man. He wasn't I think jealous is an outsider.
I got to tell you, the Hogan people were delighted when Ben Jealous.
He was a gift from God.
He was a gift from God. And I think it's Cindy. There may be a blue wave nationally, but the blue wave in Maryland is just the regular tides rising and falling. It's not anything unusual.
But I do think that Rushern Baker would have
Rushern Baker was
he would have been a far better. And this is the irony. Ben Jealous raised a lot of money. He raised over $1 million, and he had all of his friends from across the nation, and there were PACs. They spent a lot of money on advertising. And I know at one point towards the end, I was talking to someone, and I said, boy, this is just raising these expenses, and, I hate all this money is being spent. And the comment was, voters don't really care as long as that they occasionally see a commercial and they get to know that the person is kind and nice, whatever. Ben Jealous had that. And the irony is he told people in the party, I raised $1 million. In the general, I can raise $10 million. And he raised slightly over $1 million. And Larry Hogan has so much money, he doesn't know what to do with it. I mean, he's got a war chest that is unbelievable. Well, and he didn't have to spend
He didn't deliver. He didn't deliver.
He didn't deliver in a lot of ways.
We're talking about Ben Jealous. He didn't deliver in the fundraising.
Yep, and that made the difference.
And that's, well, no,
it
wouldn't have made a difference.
Well,
anyway.
I think that one of the things that did make a difference, again, I go back to party organization. He didn't have the money to do a lot of stuff, but the party structure was. And they had 3 campaign offices in Montgomery County alone. And what I was told today is that Down County, Silver Spring, Tacoma Park, and Burtonsville were the heaviest voting areas. And so that's where that effort paid off. Jealous will do very well there, as will Mark. And so it'll be interesting if and when we ever see results.
It'd be nice to see some results.
It would be lovely to see some results.
I wonder when that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But, especially in light of the fact that we have had an unusual election cycle. As you know, we had term limits that were imposed. We have new candidates that are running for the county council. I think this is, especially in the at-large races, there are basically 3 open seats in the at-large races. It'd be nice to see what some of those results were in, because the Republicans, for the first time, fielded 4 candidates to run at-large. This is something that they haven't been able to do in many, many years, to get a field of candidates into competition.
Why hasn't the governor done more to help strengthen the Republican Party?
I think it's all. I think it's more local. I mean, I think it's all it has to be done on a local grassroots basis. You can't you can't motivate a candidate to run and expect him to if he thinks he's going to lose. People get tired of losing. So I mean, for any Republican to run in Montgomery County, it's an uphill battle. But they were able to field more and better candidates, not just fringe candidates, running in this competition. So you have to give some credit to the Republican Central Committee here for that effort.
There is one race that my Republican friends say could get pulled off by the Republicans, and that's in Craig Rice's district. He's District 2. That includes Damascus Up County. And the Republican candidate has supposedly knocked on over 20,000 doors. And in back ancient history, as they call it, a guy named Phil Andrews defeated Bill Hanna. Bill Hanna was a former mayor of Rockville, had been on a long time. Phil Andrews was Common Cause, came in very quietly, almost like a stealth weapon, knocked on doors, made friends, and Bill Hanna didn't know what hit him. And so that would be the one in District 2. What I'm most interested in, and I won't know till morning, is the Republican strategy. If besides getting Hogan through, all they wanted to do was to win 5 seats in the Senate.
Yeah.
And if they change 5 seats, they get 5 more seats, the Senate will no longer be veto-proof, which would give Larry Hogan the sun and the moon and stars in the next administration. And before I came on, there's one that might be switched.
All right, well, let's take a little bit of a break right now because we want to go out to the field to Doug Tallman, who is with Nancy Florine's campaign headquarters tonight with her campaign manager. Doug, take it away.
So I'm with Rich Parsons, campaign manager for Nancy Florine's campaign. Talk a little bit about the strategy in trying to run an independent campaign in a heavily Democratic county.
Right. Well, it's kind of a new playbook because no one's ever really done this before. But the opportunity was there, and we really tried to reach out to voters in all parties and really run a unifying message to bring Democrats, Independents, and Republicans together to really talk about the county's future. So that's what the campaign has been about. We will see. We're just starting to get the numbers in. We'll see how effective it was probably very shortly.
So, I mean, the traditional things in campaign would be door knockings, yard signs, etc. How much of that played into your strategy?
Well, in our case, we had very limited time to pull this together because Nancy was not intending to run until after the primary. So we got in this just the last really couple of months, and they've really put together a great field operation. We had 700 volunteers. We had a lot of people involved. We did door knocking. We covered a lot of the polls on election day, and we also did, I think, a good direct mail campaign, very issue oriented, and we tried to focus on things that brought the county together and talked about our future. So that was really the strategy, and we'll see how it plays out tonight.
So on door knocking, how did you pick who you knocked on doors? I mean, it's usually fairly strategic, right?
Well, usually what happens in Montgomery County is you only talk to the people who vote in the Democratic primary. And so a lot of independent voters, a lot of unaffiliated voters, a lot of Republicans feel kind of left out of the process because they're never really communicated with in the general election. We really tried to reach out and motivate and turn those people out this time. And we'll see if it was effective.
How exactly do you get an independent voter to vote for you?
Well, I think what you do is you talk about issues that matter to the people of this county: transportation, investing in our schools, investing in affordable housing, and creating a kind of place where our kids want to live. And I think we talk about those issues, and we really try to get folks excited about turning out and supporting a candidate that's going to advance those issues. And you use all the traditional techniques: direct mail. We did digital ads. We did some TV on cable and broadcast, and we just tried to get that message out in a very compressed time frame.
Okay. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Back to the studio.
All right, Doug, thanks very much. When you had Florine before, she said stay tuned, so we'll give the advice right back to you. Stay tuned, and if she shows up again, Doug, we know that you'll get her for us.
But in the meantime, we're going to continue our conversation with Susan Heltemus and Casey Aiken. Thank you so very much for being here and continuing the discussion. And I think the big story of the night is the polls are still open. We don't have any numbers, and here it is, 10:30 in the evening. That's incredible that we still have no idea. We have a projection from the Associated Press that Larry Hogan won re-election, but I think most people thought that was going to happen anyway. And so that's pretty much all we have at this point.
Well, the real issue is the embargo. In the old days, when I first started campaigning, you'd have someone at the election headquarters, and they would be calling in results. So in this age of technology, we are handicapped by the fact that there's an embargo on all of the election results, and so we just have to speculate for the next hour or so.
Or two or three.
Oh, right, exactly.
I
Until the
think
morning.
that says something, though, that in parts of this county, and maybe in this county and in other parts of the state, that people are still voting. I think that is absolutely.
Well, we don't. But I mean, we're speculating at this point.
Well, when we went in, Jim said they were.
Well,
still
but
voting.
it's 10:30 at night, and so the fact that there are people that are still voting 2 hours later would be.
Well, you know,
pretty much of a stretch.
At the last night of early voting in Silver Spring, it ended at 8. That was last Thursday night. The last person in line, they give a little red card to, and when they get to the end of the line, they close the doors. People voted till 10:30 on Thursday night.
Because the last person in line
At 8 o'clock.
At 8 o'clock gets to vote,
That's
no matter
the law,
how long
wherever
the
you
line
are.
is.
Right.
So
Exactly.
they got out of Silver Spring early voting, closing it down, everything after midnight. So that's the way it is around. That's the way it's supposed to be around.
And you actually went to some polls today.
Yes, I was at Leisure World all day, which I think is the most fascinating place in the county to be. It's such a broad spectrum of people. And I was kind of shocked at how low the turnout was, because there are over 7,000 people, and they used to be one precinct with 3,000. They begrudgingly were cut into 3 precincts, and they're still mad about that. But I was...
Maybe that's why the lines were shorter.
Of course they are.
No, well, what's interesting is that there wasn't much turnout. And when I talked to Jim Shalik a little bit earlier tonight,
And Jim Shalik,
is
remind
the
our viewers.
president of the Board of Elections. And he said that early voting was rampant this time at Leisure World. And it hasn't been like that before. But for some reason, they voted at early voting at a much higher percentage than in the past. And I will tell you, it'll be interesting for me to look at that particular precinct, because you have to be at least 55 to be there. But it was raining and cold, and it makes you wonder how many people looked out today and said, forget it.
Part of the reason for the delay, we've been told 2 things. First, overcrowding and the lines are long. People are still voting. Second, technical issues of some kind. Now, you have to ask, after what happened in 2016, as unlikely as it may seem, whether, quote, technical issues may mean someone trying to crash into this election system and do damage.
Because
Have
of
any of you
our
heard-
system, no. But you know what the problem has
Why
been?
do you say that?
Because we have optic scan, and it's reader by reader. So that should not be an issue. That's why Maryland changed to optic scan. But the problem today, early voting, and candidates across the state especially, were going into other polls and calling the Board of Elections and said, we need faster scanners. Our ballot this time was 5 pages, I believe, and you scan one at a time, and it maybe takes 10 seconds, 12 seconds, whatever. You do one at a time, and you have only one scanner. If something breaks down, there were times today when people were lined up for the scanning, and that was a problem across the county.
Let me interrupt you for just a second. Let's take a break. We'll try to figure out what's going on here and come back. We'll be back with our election coverage in just a moment.
Okay.
We know you have dreams, a great job, a better life. Career success starts at Montgomery College. MC helps you get the hands-on education you need for the job you want. And you can save up to half the cost of attending other colleges. Career success. It's in your future. Start your future now at Montgomery College.
I felt the bite at age 16.
I felt the bite at age 28.
I felt the bite at age 4.
I felt the bite at age 13.
We've all felt the bite of Charcot-Marie-Tooth, and we are fighting back.
Charcot-Marie-Tooth is the most commonly inherited nerve disease. It affects the hands, arms, feet, and legs of approximately 1 in 2,500 people in the United States. If you or a loved one has CMT, find out about the latest research and educational tools that can enhance your life or the lives of the ones you love. Go to cmtausa.org and help take a bite out of CMT.
MCM, your community media center, is making Montgomery County a great place to live through programs like Small Business Network. Host Kelly Leonard brings small business leaders together to learn, network, and prosper. Montgomery Community Media. Our middle name is Community.
And welcome back. You're watching Montgomery Community Media's live election coverage on this really historic night of voting. We still don't know what the votes are, but hopefully we'll get some of those soon. I'm Cindy Pena, along with my colleague Gary Nuremberg. We're going to actually toss it right now over to Mitty Hicks, who is at the Democratic campaign headquarters with some interviews. Mitty, take it away.
The crowd is dwindling down here at Veterans Plaza in Silver Spring, but as you can still see behind me, there's still a lot of excitement. And speaking of excitement, I have Scott Goldberg. He's the chair of the Democratic Party here in Montgomery County. How are you doing today?
Terrific. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Well, can you just tell us a little bit what makes this election different?
So this is the first election, I think, in American history where the President of the United States actively goes after American citizens and tries to divide us into different classes so that we can fight each other, just so we can have political victories. And I think the American people are fed up with it, and I think they're showing that by coming out to the polls today.
And speaking of the polls, we've heard a lot of reports about voter turnout. We know that historically in midterm elections that you don't get as big as a turnout, especially within the Democratic Party. But there is a big turnout. There's an increase among young people. What do you think is contributing to that?
People are really, really angry. They don't like the leadership of their country, and this is their first opportunity to take their anger out in a productive way, which is going to the polls and voting against everything that is upsetting them and kind of everything that's wrong with the leadership of our nation.
We keep hearing this term blue wave, and that there's going to be a blue wave this midterm election. What does that mean? What will a blue wave do for the next 2-4 years?
So I think in the next 2 years, we just saw that the Democrats took back the House of Representatives. That's a huge thing. In Montgomery County, I think we're about to hear some cheers, but Mark Elrich, very progressive, very liberal county executive candidate, is about to be declared the winner. I think it's a different direction of which our country wants to go. And I think a lot of young people have been shut out for a very long time. And I think they're starting to get more involved, and they want their government to start working for them.
Right. Well, before this interview just started, Congressman Jamie Raskin said that they think they have a projected winner for Montgomery County executive. So we're going to pay attention to that, listen to that, and see if Mark Elrich will make a speech. Reporting live in downtown Silver Spring, I'm Mitty Hicks for my MC Media. Back to you in the studio.
Mitty, thanks very much. It appears that state elections officials and elections officials here in Montgomery County are beginning to get a handle on the problems caused by this overcrowding and delayed poll closing. And we're now told that in Montgomery County, 72% of the votes are now up on that website. We're trying to translate that into graphic form and have some results for you pretty soon.
That's
Casey
good news.
Aiken, you'll recognize from this network where he hosts a political show that is smarter than anything else in the county, and his antagonistic friend, a frequent guest on that show.
We may not be friends after tonight, though.
All right, well, that's Susan Heltemus over there, who's
Like I said, you have a love-hate
talking.
relationship.
You know, we were in Leadership Montgomery together in the class of 2000, and we found a deep friendship based on politics. Even though we're on opposite sides, we have a passion that we both share, and that's what's always fun about our relationship. And you know, it brings out a good thing because we are able to discuss things in a reasonable and rational way, even if we are sharply disagreeing.
And occasionally I'll hit him in the arm, but
occasionally.
Don't we wish politicians could be that way, right? On other sides of the aisle, right?
Well, let me ask you, that obviously has to cause some strain. What can we learn from the two of you who disagree so passionately about issues, and yet are able to conduct yourselves in a civil way? Why?
Yeah, sure. I want to hear this.
I will tell you, there are days, especially in this election, that it's gotten very, very tense, and I will stay away from talking to him. And there are times when both of us will cut off conversations because I don't want to hurt his feelings, and we do feel passionately, and we both feel it. It's in our voice, it's in what we say, sometimes sending each other an email, and but in the heart of it, I'm there for him and he's there for me, and if we need each other.
Well, look, this is an unusual two-year election cycle. I mean, passions are running very high on both sides of the political spectrum. I've got the perspective, and as part of it is from being the moderator of the television show. I try to balance my partisanship.
That's a lie.
with the understanding of the viewers of Montgomery County are primarily going to be Democratic and more liberal leaning, and I don't want to have it tilt too far one way or another. Although there are strong disagreements, and it's only natural given the high level of discourse that it's going to be that way.
But we don't have that high level of discourse in the state.
Well, we don't because it's a blue state. I mean, there's
But we have a Republican governor.
Yeah, but he's not a Republican governor. He's a traditional Republican governor. He's not a Trumpanista. I mean,
Which is why we don't have that kind of discourse.
Right,
in
we
the
don't
state.
have that divisiveness. Now, I mean, you look at a state where there is more of a 50-50 split either in the House of Delegates or the General Assemblies. There, you're going to see those passions arise because of the contest for control.
But Casey, if the Republicans were to shift 5 votes, we would feel that in the next session.
You'd feel more of it.
But you know what? I just checked. We do have one result. Ted Cruz beat Beto O'Rourke in Texas.
Oh, is that right?
That is a big one.
That is.
Well, I don't think that's really that surprising.
There we are.
The latest poll results.
We've got some new numbers up here now.
Wow.
That's pretty similar to tracking.
This is basically what you saw
Robin,
in the early voting.
Yeah.
65% Mark Elrich, 20% Nancy Florine, 16% for Robin Ficker.
Yeah.
Now, Susan, we listened to you a few moments ago talk about how well organized Democrats are throughout the state, and particularly here in Montgomery County. Mm-hmm. And when we saw numbers that reflected that from the WTOP website, you talked about being shocked. Explain to me the difference about being shocked at these results and your conviction that Democrats were so well organized that these results almost seemed inevitable.
The Democrats were well organized, and Casey alluded to the fact Nancy came out because she believed that this was a pivotal time in the county and that we could go, 2 different ways. The needs are growing greater every day of the week in Montgomery County with all of the people in need in our county. There is frustration among the wealthy who live in our county, and Ike Leggett said he wakes up every morning and prays for every one of them before they move away, about the top 30 or so. And so there is this dichotomy. And I thought that Nancy Florine would have done better because she's been around 16 years. She maybe split the Democratic vote, but she had a strong base. I thought the women's vote would be stronger because whether you like it or not, the Me Too thing is out there. And this morning when I woke up and was up at like around 5:30 this morning, and they were talking across the country, is this going to be the year of the woman?
Well,
and
that's
we will
a pipe dream, Susan.
Well, we don't know that.
The fact of the matter. Let's look at this election and this race. The fact is, Mark Elrich was not a popular candidate in the Democratic primary. He only won by 550 votes over an independent candidate who was self-funded, David Blair.
He won by 77 votes.
Excuse me, 77. Even you're proving my point.
77
The fact
votes.
is, he was not a popular candidate. But once the primary was over, the Democratic Party coalesced around him.
Let me interrupt for just a real quick second and tell our viewers that we're in a double box now, and what they're seeing is Florine headquarters, and when Ms. Florine begins to talk, we'll take it.
Okay.
And I'm told now that she's about to talk. So
let's listen to Nancy.
Elrich has a clear majority. So I want to wish Mark Elrich the best. I wish him well, and I wish Montgomery County the best. This has been a great campaign, and I want to thank again all of you who've contributed to making this really a great experience for so many residents to engage and to make our community better. So thank you very much, and let's go forward. Thank you.
Well, what happens to Nancy Florine now? She said, let's go forward, but for her, what does forward mean?
Well, she's out of a job at the county council as of the end of the month. Before Mark won, we were just getting into that. She was going to support whoever won. Mark Elrich and Nancy Florine are very different people, and they have very strong opinions. And so she decided that the two candidates were two polar opposites, and she felt there would be a moderate. And, you know, reaching out across the aisle on both sides. And obviously that did not work out. The Democrats, what I saw in early voting, and today there were those vote top to the bottom, and it was because show Trump that we're like it in Maryland.
Susan,
But
you're trying to impose a national vote on a local election.
But that's what they were saying, vote top to bottom.
Look, this is a local election. These were local results, and the fact is this is about a county that doesn't have an identity. There's this county council, and if Mark Elrich is the new county executive, is going to have real problems.
Casey, the picture viewers are seeing, by the way, is of Elrich campaign headquarters, and we'll go to it when he comes out. We just want to let people know what they're saying.
What Nancy thought, and I think that people who supported Nancy believe, she has been the president of the council twice. She was the mayor of Garrett Park. She served on the Park and Planning Commission. Right now, there is only one woman on the county council and 8 men. That woman is going to be the president this next year. Nancy had served on Park and Planning, had a planning background. There is nobody on the county council and no one in the county executive's office now who has planning experience. Mark Elrich was, as was said earlier by someone, has never been the president of the council. He was a teacher.
The business community is scared to death
Well,
about what's going to happen with this county executive and this county council, which has 4 new members that nobody knows exactly how they're going to be voting.
Well, and the thing is it's questionable. You know, even people who voted for him have said there is going to be a large learning curve for Mark. And you talked earlier about the unions. Mark got in on the backs of unions. If you were at the polls, early voting or today, SEIU was there, the teachers were there, they were there across the board, multiple people handing out multiple ballots. Mark told the unions what they wanted. And now he doesn't, I've not heard his vision. I have been told that Mark wants to balance the budget on county employees. And he feels that there is fat, not necessarily in the union membership, but in administration, that he can balance the budget on that. And I wish him well, because he has always gone for every social program out there, and this is going to be a true test for
Susan,
his administration.
say that another way. Balance the budget on county employees. Like
making cuts, severe cuts. And when County Executive Leggett was there, and he was there in really difficult times, and Nancy was the president of the council during one of those times. And what he did is he cut 1,200 county employees. And now Mr. Elrich thinks he's going to come in and he is going to cut more. And the feeling is, with having talked to people who are in unions, that they can do it. There's too many supervisors out there. But that alone is not going to do it. And you know, there is no mood in this county for raising taxes. Mark doesn't have a lot of leadership. I wish them well. I wish his administration.
Casey, I want to get back to your point about businesses and why they're scared to death of Mark Elrich. What are they afraid of?
They're afraid of the fact that he has never seen a social program that he hasn't embraced, and his whole background is as a socialist.
Anti-development.
And anti-development. This is why they encouraged Nancy Florine to run as an independent. It was their fear, and why David Blair ran in the primary with the backing of the business community. They were afraid of what was going to come out of either George Leventhal or Mark Elrich or whomever was a former county councilman that was running for county executive.
And is that a studied and careful use of the word socialist?
No, he will use that word.
It. Yeah, he admits it. He has a picture of Che Guevara in his county council office.
His campaign manager is from the Socialist Party in D.C.
We're going to pause right now because now we're going to go over to the Democratic headquarters in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Tacoma Park Council, I can't remember which, 19 years on the Tacoma Park Council. Now, there's some things you got to know about Mark Elrich. Okay? Number one is that he's been endorsed by all of the great environmental groups, all of the great neighborhood and citizen groups. He's been endorsed by all of the great labor unions of Montgomery County and Maryland. But he was also endorsed by the Montgomery County Realtors Association. And the reason he was endorsed by the Realtors is very clear, and they were very clear about it. What real estate professionals are in the business of is selling a quality of life. And they said that Mark Elrich was the candidate most committed and best positioned to deliver the quality of life that people in Montgomery County want and deserve. And Mark Elrich is not anti-development, he's pro-development, but he wants to make sure that all of the development is accompanied by the infrastructure that we need, the roads and the parks and the schools, so we don't have overcrowded classrooms and we don't have traffic jams everywhere you turn. Now, Mark Elrich has an extraordinary charm about him, as you know. He is an unpolitician, he is not slick. He is not flashy. He's not a flash in the pan. He has never, ever been trendy, and he will never be trendy. And that's why the great councilman, soon-to-be county executive Mark Elrich, will never go out of style because he's not trendy. He's not a flash in the pan. He's filled with integrity and public purpose. And I've been in politics long enough to know there are two kinds of politicians that you find out there wherever you go. There are power politicians and there are justice politicians. And Mark Elrich is the quintessential justice politician. Welcome, Mark Elrich.
I constrained myself to a mere 3 pages with a few moments of ad lib. But this is pretty incredible. Going from a 77 vote landslide to 200,000 votes and 65% of the vote. My opponent claimed she was going to unify the county. She probably did. She unified the county behind me. So, first of all, I want to thank you. I know I don't get where I am without you. No way. You've been carrying me down this road for a long time. This has been about a 2-year campaign. And your support from all over the county has been amazing, and you made this possible. It's not me. It really isn't. You know, I show up on a flyer, you know, I speak to 50, 100 people at a forum, but it's you, your emails and your letters and your phone calls and your door knocking made this possible. Because you told people why you were supporting me. This is so not like me. Okay, so also I have almost 4,000 donors in the public finance system. It worked. And so I'm telling you right now, some reporter asked me this a week ago. My answer is the same. I ran on public financing this time. I'm running on public financing next time. This is not going to change. 4,000 donors. You got me through the primary with the maximum match, and people said, he's never going to raise this money in the general election. He used up his donors. And I know that a certain candidate was counting on my inability to raise money. Surprise, you all came through again. Another 2,000 people, another maximum match, another ability to put almost $1 million into a campaign. My most expensive campaign ever, I think, was $125,000. And that was enough to come in first in an at-large race. So you made it possible to run a genuine, professional, all on the ground campaign. And I just had amazing help from you. And I gotta tell you, I really appreciate it. Public financing works. Big dollar donors lost. So, yeah, power to the people. There is a reason why I brought Joe Uline up here. Because Joe Uline is a labor musician. And I'm not ashamed or going to apologize now or ever for my support for working people. Never. My father told me when I was a kid that if you put a pile of gold in front of the entrance of a coal mine, not an ounce of gold comes out of that coal mine. Only when human labor goes into the coal mine does anything go out. So everybody at the table, if you're putting in capital, you get a return. You put in labor, you get a return. You get the same respect, you get the same honor, and you get the same sense of value. So I value the people who go to work every day, who make this county work, who serve us our food, who work in the hospitals. I know what side's the right side to be on. I got no shame in that. And you all have been the best ambassadors that I could ever have. Really, you have been my ambassadors, and I can't thank you enough. I want to thank a few other people. I want to thank my original campaign staff, which is Ben, Frank, and Karen, who got me through the primary. That was a really difficult race, 6 candidates up against somebody who had $5.6 million. And the worst, I thought then at the time, the worst smear campaign that was possible done by the private, Empower Montgomery, or whatever they were. I'm glad they spent the money. Really poor return on investment. And we had a great group of interns, Steve, Rich, Rabita, Ashley. Some of you guys are here. You were amazing. And Katie and Carolina, who I've also seen here tonight, you were able to stay on through school and work with the campaign into the general election. I gotta say, I really appreciate what you did. You weren't seasoned professionals, but you were smart as hell, and you knew what to do, and you got the job done, and I really, really appreciate it. I want to thank the folks who worked with me. Claire, who worked on the mailers. Claire's out there somewhere. Marty, who designed it. Marty's not here. I think she broke her knee. I don't know if she did that. But she is one of the most amazing graphic designers that I've ever known. And her ability to form an image and get a message across was just absolutely instrumental. And between Debbie and Claire working on the mailers, and Debbie, who was my campaign chair, but did so much more. And then there's Dale, who's been with me for God knows how many elections. And Tiffany and Mara, my staff has just been absolutely exemplary. I've been lucky to work with some of the smartest, most committed people, I think, that any council member got to work with. I was able to keep my staff almost through my entire term. There aren't many people who can say that people voted, worked for them the whole time. But that's because we worked together as a team, and I really appreciated the work they did. So now I want to tell you a little bit about how I got here and where we're going. When I worked at the food co-op, I was one of the founders of the food co-op in Silver Spring. We went to a co-op conference in Minneapolis, and we took a side trip and went into Minneapolis. We met with some folks from Acorn. And Acorn was a preeminent community organizing organization, as you know. And I went and met with these folks, and they were talking about politics. And they said that in the last election, they had worked to elect a delegate from Minneapolis, who when he got to the legislature, despite the fact that they provided his ground troops and made his election possible, he said to them, you know, I got lots of interests I have to pay attention to. And so I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to push your agenda. And they were really disappointed. And they said what they took away from that was that it was time to stop electing people who pretend to be your friends and elect people who are from you. People who know what your work is, know what your values are, not people you've got to convince to do the right thing, maybe if you do enough work for them, but to do the right thing because they know what the right thing is to do. And I took that message seriously, and I went back, I got elected to the Tacoma Park City Council, I got elected to the County Council. I've always seen myself, frankly, as an activist, always. I'm always a community member, and I'm always an activist. I'm always doing your work. I was never willing to transition to be the politician who's detached from the day-to-day struggles and had somehow to think about all these other things. I have to think about you. And I have tried to spend my time on the county council thinking about you, working for you, being your representative, and thinking about this as what would an activist do if they were trying to lead this county forward. And I'm proud of the work I've done, and I'm really proud of the people I've been able to work with. And I think it's meant a lot to me to be able to stay true to what I want to be and what I believe I should be. And without your encouragement, your support and everything, I think that would have been a really difficult path. So I really want to thank you. So now I'm going to tell you what I want to do with this thing, what's important to me. One is, that we declared a climate emergency. My friend Tom Hucker, we took the lead on saying by 2035, we were going to get to greenhouse gas emissions at zero. And oh, by the way, we want to shut down the incinerator. I know this is going to be difficult, but if we had set a modest goal, a really easily achievable goal, we would have achieved it. And we didn't set our works done. We set a goal, we met it. I know how hard it's going to be to get to zero. We may not get to zero by 2035, but I know that my work will never be done if my goal is zero, that I'll never be able to say that I've accomplished what I set out to do until I get there. And if the climate situation in this country isn't a frickin' emergency, I don't know what is. And the leadership on this is not going to come from Washington. It's not going to come from the state, but it's going to come from Montgomery County. And what we do here is going to be visible beyond the borders of Montgomery County. I want to talk to you about another emergency. It's an emergency that nobody here has mentioned. And, I started high school in 1964. I started school in Montgomery County in 1960. And this was a largely segregated county. and the achievement gap was duly noted when I was in high school, has been duly noted by superintendent after superintendent, county council after county council. And the achievement gap is pretty much today what it was when I started high school. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable. So as a council member, I've tried to do two things. I've tried to push on minimum wage because I know the more money the parents make, the more stable their households are. The more stable their households, the more stable their children are when they come to school. Because their kids should not bear the burden of the struggles of their parents. Their parents don't know where their rent money's coming from, where their food money's coming from. All that is passed on to the children. And it's hard to tell a kid to sit down, pay attention, do your lesson like a good child. All this other stuff is going on in the background of their heads. So I have focused on housing and income to try to make a difference. And I believe in funding the schools because they've got to have the teachers and the classrooms to do their job. But we had a meeting the other day, and in the meeting, the story was told that 25% of our kids are kindergarten ready. And I said, you know, that's a nice way to say it. Let's say it another way. 75% of our kids aren't ready for kindergarten when they start kindergarten. 75% of our children, and that probably hasn't budged an iota. A little bit here, a little bit there. I am not going to wait for another generation of kids to go through this and to waste their lives and their educational opportunities. We are going to move on early childhood education. We're not going to bite it off in tiny little pieces, so a few hundred kids every year get to have a better chance. We're going to find a way to move this thing forward and make a difference because it's as much of an emergency as the climate is. Wasting the human brain and human potential and not letting these kids have the opportunity to be what they can be is wrong, and we need to commit ourselves to putting an end to it here and now as quickly as we can.
That is the winner of the Montgomery County Executive race, Mark Elrick. Now, Anquinette Crosby is with one of the people he defeated tonight. Anquinette.
So we started the night with Robin Ficker. We're going to end the night with Robin Ficker, and maybe not so good news because he was running as a Republican candidate for Montgomery County Executive, and it looks like Mark Elrich is going to be the next county executive. So, Robin, are you going to congratulate Mark at this point?
I congratulate Mark heartily. I've gotten to know Mark during the campaign. I like Mark. He's a very friendly person. He treats everyone with dignity, but I do think he needs a few lessons of fiscal responsibility.
Okay, so Mark has pretty much won. We can say that. Are we going to see you running again?
Well, I plan to put a property tax increase limit on the ballot in 2020. That's what I'm going to be doing to help Mark be fiscally responsible.
Okay, so sounds good. Thank you for chatting with us all this evening. And I guess we'll see you again on the campaign trail.
I feel like I've been in good company.
Oh, well, thank you very much. All right, that's going to do it for us here. And we're going to send it back to you in the studio.
Anquinette, thank you so very much. And that was her with Robin Ficker, who got 16% of the vote here in Montgomery County. We're going to wrap up this section of our coverage tonight and thank Casey Aiken and Susan Heltemus so much for being with us tonight. It was a real pleasure meeting both of you and really going through the elections statewide and countywide.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Okay, we're going to take a break and we'll be back shortly.
MCM, your community media center, is making Montgomery County a great place to live through programs like 21 This Week. Montgomery County's hardest-hitting political talk show keeps you up to date with the local political scene. Montgomery Community Media. Our middle name is Community.
This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Remember that to love America, is to love all Americans, because love has no labels.
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.
We don't all start in the same place, but we all deserve the same chance. Montgomery College graduates, rise up and say, I am MC. If you came to MC to find a new career path, were born in another country, or if you have children, education empowers you to make an impact on your life, your family, your community, and the world.
Welcome back. You're watching Montgomery Community Media's live election night coverage. I'm Cindy Pena with Gary Nuremberg, and we finally have some numbers in after a long time when the polls were still open long past 8 o'clock, and now the numbers are finally coming in. I think we can go to them now. We have Mark Elrich declared the winner of the county executive race with 64%. Nancy Florine, the Democrat who turned independent to join this race, with 20%, and then Robin Ficker, the Republican, with 16%. We have other election results, if we can put those up too. Our county council at large, if you want to go through that.
4 Democrats win. Evan Glass with 19, Gabe Albornoz with 19, 19%. Hans Riemer, the only incumbent, comes in 4th, although not by much.
For governor, Larry Hogan wins a second term at 57%. His Democratic challenger, Ben Jealous, 42%. Sean Quinn, 1%, and Ian Schlackman, the Green Party, didn't get any votes, it doesn't look like.
Congress District 6, David Trone, 56%. Substantial win over Ami Hober.
And the other two. And then for District 8, Jamie Raskin is going to go back to Congress with 67% of the vote. John Walsh, his Republican opponent, 31%. Jason Wonder, 2%. Now we're going to talk about the election results and what it all means for Montgomery County and with the state of Maryland. And with us right now is Bob Levy, Washington Post columnist. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And Alex Saronis, and you can tell us a lot more about the Montgomery County podcast and blog that you write. We'd love to hear about that too. So let's talk about the results for tonight. What does it mean for Montgomery County to have Elrich win this election, Bob?
I think it means a period of turmoil, but I don't think it'll be the turmoil that everybody seems to be talking about. I don't think we're in any danger of seeing the People's Republic of Montgomery County. But I do think that Mark Elrich is going to have an enormous amount of trouble dealing with the Hogan administration, and that will harm Montgomery County in ways that were not addressed during the campaign at all. Remember that Montgomery County is one of the largest and richest jurisdictions in Maryland, and yet it does not have the drag in the political world in Annapolis that it really deserves. It has very seldom had that. And now I'm concerned, and I think others are too, that it will have even less than it might, given the resources here and given the population here.
Is that because of Elrich's lack of experience?
Sure. It's about his lack of experience. It's about the fact that Hogan is in a different party. And it's about the invidious comparisons that are going to be drawn between him and Ike Leggett. Remember that Ike Leggett took a deep breath and said, this guy is the only governor we got, and I've got to deal with him. And he did. We got our Purple Line money from Hogan. We got a situation in the last 2 months where Ike Leggett, a lifelong Democrat, refused to campaign against Hogan in Montgomery County, which is pretty much tantamount to a kiss on the cheek, I would say. And so I don't see Elrich duplicating that relationship at all, and I think it's going to cause a lot of trouble and a lot of harm to the county.
In what way?
Money and influence.
And programs?
Sure, and particularly money going forward to address some of the things that he has said he wants to address.
So what gets lost?
What gets lost are the most vulnerable people and the money to address their problems. For example, he has said during the campaign over and over again that the school performance gap will be his #1 priority. That's going to take huge dollars. Those dollars typically come from the state in great degree, and if I'm right, and I think I am, those dollars are going to be harder to get.
Gabe, I'm sorry, Alex, your thoughts on Elrich's win tonight?
So, something that's going to kind of be an issue to start, especially with his relationship with Hogan, would be the fact that it was recently leaked that Amazon probably won't be coming to Montgomery County. Many have heard that they're looking to go split it, have 2 different headquarters, and one's probably going to Crystal City, and the other's probably going to Queens. And Montgomery County is not going to play a role in that, and it's something that Governor Hogan did want to happen that Mark Elrich didn't necessarily care for. Now, I know he came out and said he'd support it if it was to come, but does the fact that Mark Elrich was kind of expected to win, did that play a role in Amazon not coming?
You say that as if it is a fait accompli.
It's not complete, but I feel like it's almost pretty much said and done. The specific places have already been named. You've heard Crystal City, you've heard Queens, and it's kind of hard to back off from that, or when they do make their decision, since that's kind of been leaked.
So do fingers get pointed at Mark Elrich then as being the reason for that happening?
Definitely not Mark Elrich himself, but it could have played a role in the decision making, leading up to where we're at right now.
So we talked a little bit about development. We talked some about education. What about transportation in Montgomery County? Because I know that is an issue that people are very concerned about, both up county and down county.
So I'm an up county guy, and I travel down county. I go to Bethesda for work. So I go from Gaithersburg to Bethesda, and I deal with traffic every day.
You do.
And it's not. It wasn't something that was a major concern for Mark Elrich. So that could definitely come into play, and it could be something that is going to be scrutinized when it comes to what decisions he makes, for us. But again, Governor Hogan has different ideas.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that's going to play with the state, with Hogan and transportation?
I think there'll be some of that, but I also think that what we're facing in transportation in this county is not just a question of more lanes and more roads and more this and more that, but a change of attitude. Most of the trips by car in Montgomery County and most of the trips in America are less than 5 miles. And we have got to change the attitudes of residents of Montgomery County who I think, for better or worse, are among many Americans who say, traffic would be just great if all the rest of these people would just get out of my way. And they don't understand that they are the traffic. They are the traffic that they hate. It's like an old Pogo cartoon or something. We are the enemy. But really, what we have to understand is that we have a ride-on bus system that is excellent, and it's underused, and it should be used much more.
And that was one of Elrich's priorities.
It was.
For sure.
He will be very well positioned to increase ride-on bus service, but he can't increase it unless people will actually get on the buses. And it's always amazing to me that people will get in a car knowing that they're about to have an agonizing 1.25 hour commute on Interstate 270, and they won't even think about doing that trip some other way. It's got to change, but the change doesn't just start with Mark Elrich, it's got to start with citizens.
Right.
Do you take the bus?
All the time.
Alex?
Once in my life. And I'm born and raised in Montgomery County. And I'll tell you, we had Mark on the Moco Show podcast, and he recommended that I take the bus to work one morning, but that's a guaranteed hour. where sometimes it's, you know, a 20-minute drive.
And sometimes it's an hour and 20
and
minutes.
sometimes it's an hour and
So
20
let's
minutes.
flip the
But
coin.
but I'll tell you that, you know, the 80% of the time that it's a half hour or less kind of beats out the guaranteed hour. And we looked at with a couple of the interns that work for the MoCo show, kind of looked at different kind of rides in the county and how long they would take by car and by bus, and it's almost double no matter what you're doing. So it's tough to find that time for those rides.
And let's be realistic, though. Montgomery County, there are many areas of Montgomery County where people are vehicle dependent.
Sure.
I mean, you know, there is no access to a bus line that's convenient. And so for those folks, you know, what kind of situation or what kind of solutions do we have?
But look at the clumping of population. This is a very clumped county. Most people live below Gaithersburg. Above Gaithersburg, you're absolutely right, but below it, there are opportunities all the time. These buses run morning, noon, and night. And here's the clinching argument to me. The minute I get on the bus, I'm at work. I can pull out my iPad or my laptop and start working. And I'm gaining time that I otherwise would be sitting in traffic, fuming and listening to music that I don't really like very much.
Or pundits who you don't really
Or
like
pundits
very
who I don't really like very much. So I think this has got to be explored much more, and these multi-zillion-dollar pie-in-the-sky ideas, among them from Hogan, who has said he wants to add lanes to the Beltway and add lanes to 270. We're going to be very old and gray before that happens, and I'm not sure that's the right answer anyway.
We might see reverse lanes on 270.
I'm glad you did say that you rode the bus, because so many times a lot of people that advocate for using the bus, they'll say you need to use the bus more, always leave those meetings getting into their car and driving off.
That's right.
You know, and it's good to see that there's people that do use the bus. And we did a poll, I think 11% of our followers said that they've used the bus more than once in the last 6 months.
Day to day, my life as a Montgomery County resident, how does it change with a new county executive? Do I feel it at all?
You might feel it a little bit if you had children in the public schools, because I think there's going to be a reorientation of some of the money in the public schools. But remember this, Gary, Mark Elrich didn't run for president of the student council, and he didn't run for head of the school board. He is over and above the body that gives money to the school board to spend. So he does not have absolute authority to fix the schools. And I think he's going to run into an awful lot of political trouble among people who don't understand that, who want him to be God Almighty and to fix it tomorrow, or better yet, yesterday. The school board is enormously powerful in this county, and it should be. It has more than half of the budget that Mark Elrich will be responsible for passing and appropriating. But he will not have the final say about how it's spent. He can only recommend, he can nudge a little bit, he will be the daddy, but he won't be the absolute authority.
Well, we want to end this night on a very positive note. We've got, you know, I mean, positively, we had overwhelming voter turnout.
Yes, indeed.
Right? I mean, let's start there by talking about what this election has meant for Montgomery County, Maryland, and the country in terms of voter turnout.
So yeah, I mean, I've never seen this many people talking about voting, and it was great to see that it actually happened. You know, that's the number one thing. We've heard people talk about going to vote, but you know what's gone on in our country for the last 2 years plays a big role in that. And it's good to see that people are getting out there and you know, showing with their actions that they want to see change.
More than that, and in addition to that, when I voted this morning and stood in line for more than an hour in the rain to do it, the people in line in my precinct who typically have hair my color were not just those people this morning. This morning there were millennials. There was a mom with a baby right behind me. I don't see those people in off-year elections all the time. So it's not just raw numbers. Sure. It was who they were. And I was really aware of that today.
Wait a minute. This is a good thing?
Sure, it's a good thing.
Why do you question that?
I'm the co-producer of 2 millennial children, and they are passionately political. And I know a lot of their friends, and these are millennials who are pretty much in the world, and they were all saying, you know, why should I vote? This whole thing is just such a circus. Why should I bother to vote? One vote doesn't matter. And, you know, I would spend a lot of time saying one vote could matter. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your friends, neighbors, all that. And I was really concerned that millennials would not turn out today, and in my experience, they did.
That's great.
They voted in greater numbers in early voting than ever before in the midterm. Alex, is that your experience as well? And if folks are becoming involved at a younger age, do they stay for upcoming elections, or is this one just so specifically driving them that?
I'd say being on the older side of being a millennial myself, I know that I recently started voting. I started voting the last 5 years, and I know that many people my age don't. But I think it's the generation right after mine, you know, kind of 18 to 34. Those are the ones that turned out, and those are the ones that are going to continue to turn out. So I think it's here to stay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Snapchat and I just missed that one, but so it's my generation is kind of going to be where we've been, but the generation after me. That's the one, they're here to stay.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked earlier about voting being cool.
Yeah, right?
And
it is.
It better be.
It's cool.
It better be.
I'm a teacher. I'm a middle school teacher.
And how about...
I'll tell you that the kids are talking about voting. They can't even vote yet. They're talking about it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Where are you a middle school teacher?
North Bethesda Middle School.
Oh, fantastic. What do you teach?
I'm the head of the PE department.
Excellent. Good. Getting kids out there for
Absolutely.
exercise. We love to see that. Well, what's cool about living in Montgomery County, Bob?
Everything. I love living here. I've lived here for more than half my life. I think the level of the people in this county is as good as it is anywhere in the world. My favorite Montgomery County story is that we not only are connected with the national world downtown, but we are connected with the local world at the same time. I live in Bethesda and have for a long, long time, and I remember one time 35, 40 years ago, I was walking my dog and I ran into a neighbor, and Gerald Ford was president, and he had just negotiated the anti-ballistic missile treaty, and I said, "What do you think of this anti-ballistic missile treaty?" And the guy looked at me and he said, "I wrote it." And that was one of my neighbors. And you're going to have a tough time finding that anywhere else. But at the same time, there we were walking dogs on a little street, and we were just two daddies in our sneakers. And
picking up your dog's poop.
Yeah, and so it goes both ways. Montgomery County's got a lot of history vis-a-vis Washington, D.C. It always will, it always has. But it can be separate, and now it really is a separate world. And we are a city now just as much as any city. Mm-hmm. We have every urban problem. We have it in the same proportions, and we're going to have the same kinds of solutions.
You've been writing nonfiction for a long time.
I have.
You just did your first novel, Larry Felder, Candidate.
There it is.
I'm told that this thing is essentially based in Montgomery County.
It is not essentially based here, it is totally based here, and the basic plot is famous Washington newspaper columnist gives up journalism to run for Congress in the 8th District of Maryland, where we're sitting right now, Montgomery County. And all kinds of stuff happens to poor Larry. Love happens to him, treachery happens to him, corruption happens to him. Those nasty newspaper reporters get in his way, but the good guys win in the end, and the book has gotten a lot of nice buzz so far.
Any candidates we saw tonight, models for any of the folks in your
Not
novel?
as such, Gary, but there are many politicians in this book who are kind of a goulash and omelet. I put together a bunch of candidates and politicians whom I really know and molded them into one person. And I did that for Larry Felder also.
That's great.
That's fiction. Alex?
Alex has a website.
Website and podcast, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I talk about anything going on in Montgomery County, restaurants opening, restaurants closing, you know, any kind of news that's going on. A car drove into a pool in Montgomery Village last month, and you're going to know and see the pictures on my website.
And
so
tell us what that website is.
It's mocoshow.com, the Moco Show podcast.
And what made you decide to start that?
So I predict snow days. I'm a teacher. I started something called Moco Snow. I predict snow days. It got really popular, but then the winter would end and I had nothing to do. So I decided to kind of start reporting on things across the county, and here we are.
Excellent. Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure to have both of you join us.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
and you know, I think we're going to end the program tonight on a high note, right? We've got our results in. We had high voter turnout. and we've got some new leadership at the county level.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. When she says we're going to end on a high note, where marijuana legislation was not necessarily on any ballots here today, and I don't think that's what Cindy meant.
No,
Did you?
I didn't. No.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure being here. All right, we'll stay with Montgomery Community Media for the latest election results on our website, mymcmedia.org. There you will find more live coverage tomorrow and all of the results and a special post-election analysis in a program that begins tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
And 2 years early, let me say this, vote.
Thank you so very much. On behalf of my partner here, Gary Nuremberg, I'm Cindy Pena. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, and good night.
The preceding program was made possible through the collaborative efforts of the PEG channels of Montgomery County, Maryland. Your public education and government channel organizations are providing local news, information, arts, and sports content specifically for and about the people of Montgomery County, Maryland. The PEG channels thank you for your continued support.